Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm your host Tambucha, and what you see here is a modified version of Garuda Linux that I installed on my son's PC roughly a week ago. Originally he had Windows 10 on this computer, and so I installed Garuda Linux alongside it to make it a dual boot system. So in this video I'm gonna go through the steps and show you how I created this dual boot system. Now this is the finished product, and the NeoFetch for it is here. As you can see, it's running XFCE 4.18. The CPU is an i5 4th generation 4690, and the graphics card is a GTX 1050, and it contains 16 gigs of RAM. Now I have a couple screenshots of the PC itself. It's a Lenovo ThinkCentre. It's a business class small form factor PC. It's about 10 years old, and I bought it used roughly 5 years ago. Now when I bought it, it didn't exactly look like this. I took out the original hard drive, I replaced it with this 2 terabyte spin drive, and I added a new 1 terabyte SSD to it. The power supply is very low for a PC. It's only 240 watts, but having said that, I installed this GTX 1050 graphics card, and this is a lower power consumption graphics card. It's a budget graphics card, but nevertheless it's powerful enough for the games that my son plays at 1080p, such as Fortnite, Valorant, Dota 2, among other games. He also does his homework on this PC here. But the reason why I decided to install Linux onto this PC is I wanted to get him familiar with Linux, because this system runs Windows 10. It cannot upgrade to Windows 11, so after 2025 there'll be no more updates for Windows 10. It'll be the end of life for Windows 10. So after that, this will probably be converted into a full Linux PC. So, like I said, this is the finished product. So I have some videos that I created of the install process. This is the combined video here. So what I did was, during the install process, I captured it using a capture card, and then I combined it all into this one video. So I'm going to play that for you. So what you need to do, actually I'm going to pause this for a second. What you need to do first is you actually need to download the Garuda Linux ISO. So all you do is search for download Garuda Linux, go to this tab here, and you'll be met with a bunch of links to different versions of Garuda. These are all Garuda Linux with basically a different look and feel to them. I tried a few of them. I tried this version, it does work. The KDE Dragonized edition is the one that we're going to be using today, and this one works also for me on my computer. But word of warning, I did try this XFCE edition, and for some reason after the install process it booted to a black screen. So I think something is wrong with this edition. I don't recommend you try it, but if you want to, go ahead. For the purposes of this video, I'm gonna be using this ISO here, which you can get from one of these links right here. Now I'm not gonna actually go through the download process. I already downloaded it. But after you downloaded the ISO, you wanna make it into a bootable ISO. So to do that, you can't just copy the ISO file onto a USB drive. You need an actual program to do that. Now most people, or a lot of people I should say, recommend this program here, Balena Etcher. You can try that if you want. I've tried that and it worked for me most of the time, but on certain Linux ISOs it glitched out on me. So I got frustrated with that, and I decided to change over to this program here, which is called Rufus. It does the same thing as Balena Etcher. It creates a bootable or a bootable USB from your ISO, I should say. Well, this one doesn't seem to glitch out on me, so this is the one I recommend, and this is the one that I use from Windows to make a bootable ISO. So I'm not going to go through the install process, but if you have trouble, you can search for how to use Rufus. There'll be links. There's some links to videos here. There's links to websites here to show you how. It's pretty straightforward. I didn't have to use any links to these instructions. You should be able to pick it up. Like I said, it's pretty easy to use. So without further ado, let's continue with the video and the install process. So from here, I assume that you downloaded the ISO and made the USB, bootable USB, I should say. And from here, you should boot into your BIOS. Now, if you don't understand what a BIOS is, or you don't know how to boot into it, basically when you first power up your computer, before it boots into Windows, there should be a screen that shows up for a few seconds, and it should say press F1, press F2, or perhaps press delete. It'll say press a certain key to enter into your BIOS. Every BIOS is different, so unless you have the same computer as me, your BIOS won't look the same as this. But basically, once you find the proper key, like I said, it could be F1, F2, F12, escape. It could be a number of different keys, but it'll be just one single key that you press. And after you enter into your BIOS, you should go to the portion of the menu where you can find your startup options. And once you reach your startup options, for example, this is mine here, and you want to change those options and make sure your USB is the first drive in that list to boot up, because if it is not the first drive to boot, then basically you cannot install your Linux. It's got to be the first in the list. So from this video here, I rearranged my hard drive boot order. This one here, SATA 1, is the one that has the Windows bootloader onto it, and I want to install my Linux bootloader onto this one. So that's why I changed the bootloader there. And then after that, all I did was press F10 to save and exit. Oh, also from here I chose the boot mode as auto, and I chose legacy first because Windows 10 was installed using legacy mode, so I just decided to keep the Linux install as legacy mode. Now you can try UEFI mode if you prefer that, but to be honest, whatever works. So for this system, the legacy mode works, so I just left it at that. Okay, so after I exited and saved into the BIOS, it booted. This is the boot screen you're met with once the USB drive boots. And you have two main options. Since I have an NVIDIA card, I'm going to choose this option here. If you don't have an NVIDIA card, you should choose this one here. Now after I press enter, there would be a bunch of text like boot loading, like a boot loading screen, initialization options and all that, but it's basically going to take some time. For me, it took about 3 minutes, so I cut that out in the video. And so after 3 minutes, you're going to be met with a graphical interface. So 1 second, I'm going to fast forward this a bit. So basically after 3 minutes, you're going to boot into the graphical interface, and all I did was I chose install Garuda Linux, and then it's going to go through the install process. So from here it detected my language, my region correctly, so I just kept pressing next. But from here I chose manual partition. Now, actually I'm going to go back a bit, 1 second. Where was that? So for me I chose manual partitioning, but for you, maybe you don't have 2 hard drives, maybe you just have 1 drive, you could choose this option. Or if you don't have Windows or you want to replace Windows altogether. I don't recommend that for noobs or new users. I recommend you create a dual boot system alongside Windows, so this option will probably work for you. But for me, I'm just going to show you how I did it, and I do the manual partitioning, which is a little more complicated. So from here, if you remember in the BIOS, I chose this drive here, my spin drive, as the second boot partition. So the USB was the first one, and then this one was the second one. And the reason why I did that is so that Linux could install it on this drive. So it set it up the way I want it. It's going to install on the spin drive, which is this one here, and that's what I wanted, so that's correct. Now from here, if you're doing legacy mode like I am, you can actually skip this. This is actually for the UEFI mode, but I'm so used to this, I do this step all the time on my other computer that I did this here anyways. But to be honest, if you do it on legacy mode, you can skip this step. This step is basically not necessary, but I did it anyways, and it didn't really hurt my install system. So this is the mount point you would assign it to if it was a EFI system or UEFI system. Now from here I clicked on this drop down menu and I switched over to the other drive. Now this drive, as you can see, it has 2 NTFS file systems here. So this is the reserve file system that Windows uses, and this is where all the other Windows files are installed. This is the SSD drive, and originally it used the whole drive, but within Windows I used a partitioning tool to free up 200 gigabytes for my Linux file system. Now if you don't know how to do that in Windows, if you don't know how to resize your partition to make room for Linux, I'm going to put a link down in the video below to my previous video, and that video is only about a minute long, and it's going to show you how I did that step. So you're going to need some space from your Windows drive or another drive so that you can install Linux onto that. You don't want to install it on the same partition as Windows. Actually, you cannot do that anyways. You have to install it on a separate partition. So as you can see here, this one says cache. So before I did the Garuda install, I actually installed cache OS onto this drive here. But unfortunately, even though cache worked, it did not detect Windows in the bootloader. So I decided to try Garuda instead. So after this, I deleted the cache partition. I created a new partition, and the mount point is going to be /, which is basically the root partition, and I renamed it to Garuda. Okay, so from here it gives a message about GPT. I just ignored this message. That's basically the GPT partition is basically the recommended type of partition if you're using EFI or UEFI setup, but I'm using the old style legacy setup, so I just decided to disregard this message. From here you just enter your usual username and host name and password. Now since I'm doing it on bare metal, I want a strong password for this one. And so here it shows you a breakdown of everything it's going to do. So you want to make sure, go over this, make sure everything is correct before you proceed. And once you hit this, once you hit install now, there's no turning back. So make sure everything is fine. Like from this point here, once you hit this, it's going to start installing. So this is part of the install process. It's pretty boring. It takes about 15 minutes on my computer. So I fast forwarded it. I didn't record everything. And so once it's done, you're going to be met with this screen roughly 10 to 15 minutes after, and it's going to ask you, it's going to tell you may want to restart your system. Now I don't restart, I do a shutdown. So basically I shut it down and I take out the USB stick and then I restart the computer. And the reason why you want to do that is if you just hit restart instead of shutdown, once it restarts, it could reboot into your USB stick, and you don't want to do that. You want to boot into your actual installed operating system. So once you shut it down and you take out the USB stick and then you power back up again, it'll boot up into a menu similar to this here. So as you can see, Garuda Linux did detect Windows 10, which is what I wanted. So from here I'm gonna choose Garuda Linux. I'm gonna fast forward a bit. So okay, so from here, upon first boot of your fresh install, it's gonna always go into this and you're gonna have to type in your password and it's gonna update everything for you. So I'm going to fast forward this. This will take a few minutes as well. And then here, this is the Garuda Setup Assistant. From here, you have many options. I'm not going to go through all of it, but that's one of the selling points of Garuda. It's one of the reasons why I recommend Garuda. If you're a new user and you want to try Arch, Garuda is my first pick. And one of the reasons is it has a very good welcome screen or setup assistant, which gives you a lot of options. Now I'm going to fast forward this. It's kind of boring and I'm not going to go through everything, but yeah, there's a lot of options and it's pretty straightforward. But after that, okay, so I'm going to skip all of that boring part. There's a lot of options there that you can go through. Once you install it, you can go through it yourself, and that's, like I said, that welcome screen is a big help to new users, and it's one of the good features that make Garuda Linux more user-friendly out of the box. But I'm not going to waste too much time going through that. And so after this is basically the install is complete. But since the XFCE edition didn't work for me and I want to actually use XFCE, what I did was I installed the files needed for a vanilla XFCE install. And when I say vanilla, I mean non-customized. So fast forward a bit. These are the commands that I installed. This is the very minimum that you need for XFCE, sudo pacman-s xfce4. If you want to add the Whisker menu plugin, which I recommend, this is the command for it. This is an editor, text editor. This is a GTK theme for XFCE, and this is my default file manager, PCMan-FM. So after you press enter and press Y, it will go through the install process of those apps. And then basically all you have to do is log out and restart your computer. Or sorry, log out and restart the session. So here I logged out. There's a drop down menu. Check XFCE, enter the password, log back in. I'm going to fast forward a bit, and right here you're met with the vanilla XFCE edition. And from here, that's the end of the video. After this phase, I continued on customizing the XFCE, and in the end, what I got is what you see here on the screen. Now, from the vanilla edition to this point here, it took me somewhere between half an hour to an hour. I didn't record that on video, but I did make a previous video, and I can add that to the link below also. And if you watch that video, you'll have a good idea of how I customized my XFCE, although it doesn't look quite the same as it does now in that video. Anyways, and also what I also added is a feature that I want to show you. It's called Zentile. So before, in my previous videos, I showed you the basic, what I call pseudo tiling. So I hold on to the super key and I click some arrow keys on the number pad keys, and it will move my windows around and resize them. And this is the manual way. So if I open, say, a file manager and a terminal, for example, this terminal, I want to move it there, right? Maybe I'll, let's see, 1 second. Do something like that, and maybe I want to open a web browser and I want to put it down there. Well, no, I don't want to put it there. 1 second. Let's see. And I could do it like this, right? So I use pretty much all of my screen real estate, but that's the manual way. I have a program called Zentile that I installed, and I'll probably make a separate video out of that, but I'm just going to show you a quick preview. So to activate Zentile, I would press Ctrl-Shift-T to tile, and now it's going to turn my floating window manager into a tiling window manager. So if I hit this, it goes full screen. If I open something else, such as a text editor, it'll split it in half. If I open my browser here, it'll split it again. And if I can press Ctrl-Shift-M, it'll make my browser the master. I have some other functions. For example, if I hold on to the Control key and I press the right bracket, I can move these over like that. And if I press the right bracket, I can resize it this way. So, but to be honest, for tiling window managers, this is as far as I will go. This is like, I don't want to add, say, another window such as this, or it's just too small. Like the more you add, the smaller it'll get. So that's not very useful for me. This is probably as far as I go, like one main one here and two smaller ones here. But yeah, this is not a very extensive review of Zentile. I just wanted to show you, give you a brief introduction to it. But yeah, so that's my auto tiling here. And if I want to turn it off and go back to the floating method, I just press Ctrl-Shift-U to untile, and then it goes back to the regular style. So yeah, so this is my customized version of Garuda Linux. Sorry for all the rambling. I usually just try to talk on the fly, but I do have some concepts I have in mind. The reason why I don't script, although maybe in the future I might, but the reason why right now I don't want to script is I want to make it similar to like a live session, so that with practice my commentary will become smoother and more fluent. But anyways, this is my 10th video, and if you found this informative, please share, like, and subscribe. I do spend a lot of time making these videos, especially this one here. You can see all these files here. They're basically related to this one video, and like I said, I installed this operating system about a week ago, and a week later, after thinking about what to do and having all these smaller videos, I have to edit it and do all this stuff to it. Like, it takes a good chunk of my day. So if you find this informative, please spread the love, share the video, and hopefully I'll get more subscribers. But enough of my ranting. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, guys, take care.